Greetings there, YouTube. Today's video is going to be my third installment in the tech level series that I've been doing the last month or so. Going to do this one on steampunk. It's also going to be, in some parts, a book review. There we go. Book review on this guy here, which is one of my favorite books, and also just a discussion on alternate tech lines and how to incorporate that into a game and how that works beyond the two other books I've already talked about, which is high tech and low tech. First off, let's maybe define steampunk. Steampunk, or as I know it, Victorian science fiction. I like this term better. I don't know when and where and why and how steampunk became the default term for it. Primarily, it emphasizes this idea of alternate tech lines, specifically in steam technology. What if steam power was able to be more efficient than it was in the 19th century and was not superseded by diesel and gasoline engines. But steampunk is also science fiction. Let me emphasize that. It is set in the Victorian period, which is early to mid 1800s to the beginning of World War I. That's the Victorian age. So steampunk generally is, most traditions have it as an alternate history. Certainly the original Victorian writers wrote as alternate histories. H.G. Wells, Edgar Rice Burroughs, Jules Verne. If they made up new worlds, it was actually something like a new planet going to Venus or going to the moon. So the locations would be familiar, but unexplored, which is another theme we'll talk a little bit about with steampunk. But steampunk, not just with the alternate technological lines, but also what we would consider pseudoscience or phony science today. Things like can't remember the writer of Frankenstein, but the Frankenstein and Frankenstein's monster would be a great example of Victorian science fiction, where there's kind of this deep question of, well, what makes a person, and it's answered with science. It just takes electricity and the right components. Frankenstein's monster is in fact a great example of technology, because that's what it is. It's science. Science being used beyond the most obvious uses. Like, you can create a steam engine, of course, but we're just touching the tip of the iceberg. There's got to be more uses for these new concepts like electricity. What can we do with that? How can we generate more? Is electricity the spark of life? That sort of thing. The book Island of Dr. Moreau is, I don't believe he uses technology. I want to say it's some sort of an elixir combined with vivisection, which is sewing different animal parts or body parts of different people together to try and make a new creature, which has actually been attempted, sick as it is, in the real world. Even the Nazis actually experimented with it. Dr. Mengele actually took two identical twins and attached them together to try and make a Siamese twin. So the idea of pseudoscience and real science really blurs with the genre, and that's kind of the beauty of it. Not to gross anybody out with that analogy, but I mean, it's a historical attempt to use flawed science to its own ends, which can be another aspect of Victorian science fiction, because on one hand you have a lot of stuff written about how it'll take us in new directions, and as a GM, that means new storylines, new characters, new technology in terms of equipment and transportation, new character archetypes. A gadgeteer would fit in perfectly in a steampunk world, but you also have this growing fear of science, as if scientists will science is no longer just kind of the realm of crazy old alchemists trying to turn lead into gold. It's actually producing things. It's producing very bizarre technologies like telegraphs and as I said, steam engines. And you go from 500 years of black powder towards the end or middle part of the Victorian age. Smokeless powder is invented. Modern gunpowder is invented. Science also accepts the germ theory as in how diseases and infection works. So there's a lot of great advancements, but there's also this great level of fear and skepticism where are these people Frankenstein's monster? Are they playing God? Or Dr. Moreau, are they playing God? Is that what the ultimate goal of science is? Do we not need God anymore? So there's deep questions, and if you want very serious storyline developments or character developments, if you do even as a GM want to incorporate humanoid animal races or even robot technology, or the most rudimentary of robots into a campaign, there is that element too. Beyond just steampunk or the Victorian science fiction realm, first of all, the tech level of Victorian science fiction, I hate to do it, but I know everyone's seen the damn movie. Wild Wild West. It really is a very bad example of steampunk, but it technically is. I'm sorry if that offends anybody. It offends me, but I have to use an example because nothing's coming to mind. Tech level for the Victorian age, or as I referred to it in my other video, the Age of Steam, this is kind of why, is represented as 5+1, as in the +1 is the alternate tech level paths, or 5+2, and usually written in parentheses next to it is the certain level or technological line that happens to be brought into a more advanced state. Steampunk heavily encouraging the idea of steam technology being able to do this, but it's, as I said before, pseudoscience, because during the time, internal combustion gas and diesel engines were being built towards the end of the Victorian age, and even by the mid-20s, steam cars, gas and diesel were all being used side by side. So there was competition, but ultimately steam engines can't build up the kind of pressure to produce the kind of energy in a convenient enough package. They have to be really big to produce a lot of energy, where an internal combustion engine does not necessarily. Because you can only build up so much steam pressure in such a space. I guess unless you're building a steam-powered car, it doesn't matter that much. But as pseudoscience, you don't need to give a shit about that. It can be a new metal, or it can be simply a new theory that allows engines to be built in such a way that they are reinforced to the pressure or whatever, or it just can be never addressed because the players might not even care. So you've got the steam element, obviously, but also there's other concepts, medicine, as I talked about before. Something like resurrecting the dead. Yes, you would be in tech level 5, but it wouldn't be +1, because +1 would represent it as tech level 6 medicine from the early 20th century. It wouldn't be tech level +2, because that would mean medicine is tech level 7 rather than tech level 5, and we can't recreate people now, so it would be tech level 5 +3 or 5 +4, depending on, as a GM, how you would want to decide what tech level raising the dead is with science alone. But I'm trying to think of maybe another example of the tech levels outside of the steam engines and medical technology. I guess maybe I'll think of something before the video is done. Another big aspect of steampunk is a kind of merging of the scientific world with the paranormal. Occultism started becoming a real big thing and a much less taboo thing in the Victorian age. This is where you get seances and Ouija boards and that kind of stuff. But kind of blending in this idea that, you know, maybe we can build a machine that talks to ghosts. What if you have you design the proper coil that is attached to a speaker? Can ghosts talk through that, assuming there's such a thing as ghosts? That's Victorian science fiction. Psychic phenomenon, where maybe even 100 years before, you didn't even, if it was supernatural and it wasn't divine, it was magic, right? And that's from a historical point of view. Psychic phenomenon, I want to say that even the word itself, psychic, comes from the Victorian age. So it's also reoccurring with this theme of kind of scientists being bigger than gods. Well, Darwin had published his theories in 1840s or 1850s. So there's also kind of this idea, well, why isn't man evolving? Is it just wrapped up in technology? What if it's just our minds that are going to evolve and soon people will have psychics? That's another element that could easily be incorporated, not just in a steampunk world, but in any alternate history world. You could set it in a modern timeline. There's plenty of alternate World War II games, genre, book spin-offs and movies and stuff that kind of take that into effect too. For alternate tech outside of necessarily a steampunk world, personally I actually use the steampunk book not just I don't actually have a true Victorian set steampunk world. I use it actually for my fantasy game world that has dwarves and gnomes as being tech level 5 in clockwork and steam power, and also being what would be 5+1 technically in aviation. They're able to create dirigibles, airships, and where humans are tech level 4, they're not as capable of such detailed craftsmanship, and then orcs and some of the lesser races are down there, tech levels 2 and 3, depending on who they are and where they live, but they can't even grasp their mind around the concept, let alone are familiar with the principles to create it, because that's another very important theme, if I didn't stress that enough in the other videos, is things that'll take place in one tech level. There's always that tech level before where they're just coming into a prototype stage, or just coming into they're still in a theoretical stage. So theoretically, most of the stuff in the steampunk era, whether it's personal automobiles or things like robots, for those of you that are really interested in the genre, I highly suggest watching the movie Metropolis. I want to say you could probably watch it free now. It was made in 1920 or so. It's a silent film, but it more heavily on the science fiction elements, but it does kind of foresage robots before they happen, and that is a big aspect of the genre of alternate timelines in general, is placing things oftentimes before they should come about, and that's reflected in a lot of the writing. Jules Verne, the Nautilus. We can't even produce well, we probably could, but it costs billions and billions of dollars to produce a ship capable of what the Nautilus is supposedly able to do, diving as deep as it does, and not just the depth from a purely physical standpoint on the hull itself, but there's the book describes several windows, like on the bridge and in Nemo's quarters, where they can see out onto the ocean floor. They're not just little portholes. Like, if you've ever seen any of the footage from, like, the Titanic, not the fucking stupid movie, but the actual discovery and investigation of the Titanic, the actual ship, they're using these tiny little submersibles, a little bit bigger than a pickup, that have a window that's like this fucking thick and maybe only twice as big across, because it needs to be that thick in order to contain the pressure. So having a ship that can dive this deep with these spacious interior and these big windows that let you see out on the ocean floor, that's even higher technology than we have now. So something like that would probably be expressed as TL5 plus 2 or plus 3. Or H.G. Wells is another good example with his book, or novella, it's not even really a book, the Land Ironclads, where he basically describes what happens when the first tanks show up in World War I, 15 years before it actually happens. Almost to a T, and it really does foreshadow this this situation quite aptly. It would be technology that was available at the time, but it was still in development stage, where, as I said before, World War I kind of ends the Victorian age, so there's a buffer, there's a break there, but Wells and Verne and even Edgar Rice Burroughs has a lot of good stuff on alternate technologies, and especially with Edgar Rice Burroughs, and Pellucidar, the continent on the inside of the world. I think it's called At the Earth's Core, is the name of the book, as opposed to Journey to the Center of the Earth. And there's another one with, I think it's Tarzan at the Earth's Core, I think is what it is. There's a couple books about it, but he does introduce what is essentially to him modern technology, be TL5 or TL6, with an airship that does end up traveling to this continent in the center of the Earth. He describes how he gets there. There's like a hole in the ice cap where it gradually sinks down, and it's far-fetched, but it's science fiction. But everybody in this continent is still Stone Age. So there's a pretty distinct culture clash there, and that's also another big aspect of Victorian writing is imperialism would be a major political component during the Victorian Age. So high technology interacting with very low technology would be a very common thing. Not to keep talking specifically about steampunk, but just at least to give you ideas. I know I didn't go into a lot of specifics, but that's because there's just so much to really cover. You can use alternate tech lines in any campaign that you wish to. It doesn't have to be purely historical for different technology paths to be utilized outside of the Victorian science fiction school or thought process. Many of the Final Fantasy games are clearly not in any way steampunk, but they do incorporate kind of alternate, or actually anime in general has a lot of stuff that incorporates alternate tech lines, and not just in terms of transportation and steam technology, as I said before, medicine, weapon technology. History is filled with examples of what happens when higher technological weapon societies interact with lower technological weapon societies, but just power in general too. Sure, a water mill is nice to maybe, or a windmill is nice to maybe draw up water from the ground, but the Romans developed plumbing and aqueducts. That's a whole new technology level. Even in your tech level 2 and 3 games, introducing something from just a couple tech levels above, with transportation again, how easily would one of the ships of the Great Spanish Armada, how easily would a ship like that run circles around a Greek or a Roman galley or something like that? So there's a lot of different ways you can incorporate it into a game. It can be a source of conflict, not necessarily for player versus player, but players interacting with other NPCs, or as an overarching theme with kind of, like I said, maybe perhaps a fear of science. But there are just so many different possibilities with it. Tech level should not be simply limited to, I want to do a historical campaign, or it really doesn't matter because we're just going to do a medieval campaign. There's so many different, I hate to use the word levels, but so many different avenues, so many directions of thought you can go just by simply changing around the technology and the order of discovery, even the order of philosophy and social ideas being incorporated. What if America had stayed a part of the monarchy of England, how things would change then. That would be a alternate timeline as well. Hitting the 25-minute mark, which is not what I wanted to do, but if you've watched it this long, again, I thank you. Like if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you really enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.